Communications Minister unveils terrorist plans hatched in Colombia to set off bombs in strategic points of Caracas. Hurricane Dorian barrels towards the Bahamas as citizens prepare for the worst. And violent protests in Hong Kong continue as rioters have been using petrol bombs. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. We begin in Venezuela, where Communications Minister Jorge Rodriguez has revealed a plan by far-right terrorist cells to set off a number of explosives across Caracas. He made the announcement during a media conference.
El pasado 17 de agosto,
on August 17, members of the Ministry of People's Power found suspicious packages that had been thrown outside the headquarters of the Special Action Force in Sucre Parish, which contained explosive devices inside.
He also warned that these foiled bomb attacks were meant to be part of a larger terrorist plan against the people of Venezuela.
I warned the people of Venezuela and the world that this is a part of a bigger plan that was going to be put into action in 2 weeks' time, in 15 days. These terrorists plan to carry out large-scale attacks against the people of Venezuela and the constitutional government of the Bolivarian nation.
Soon after Minister Rodriguez revealed these terrorist plans, the Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, tweeted that the Bolivarian government will present conclusive evidence to the UN, which shows the Colombian government has sheltered these terrorist cells. She said the evidence proves these cells were trained and armed in Colombia to carry out attacks against our constitutional order in violation of the Security Council Resolution 1373. During his news conference, Jorge Rodriguez gave evidence to support these allegations, demanding a response from the Colombian government. Thousands of Venezuelans took to the streets of Caracas on Saturday as part of the Great Anti-Imperialist March. Under the slogan, "No More Trump," the people marched from Morelos Plaza to Miraflores Palace to condemn unilateral sanctions imposed by the U.S. government that seek to coerce the democratically elected government. People have also reaffirmed their support for President Nicolas Maduro. This march is part of hundreds that have taken place across the globe against U.S. sanctions that are hurting everyday Venezuelans. In the Bahamas, some citizens were given a final warning to evacuate as Hurricane Dorian barrels towards the island. Prime Minister Herbert Minnis, in an address to the nation, said anyone who stays is risking their lives. He made the comment as the U.S. National Hurricane Center said areas in the northwest of the country can spend an extended period in Dorian's eye wall. It adds that the storm was packing maximum sustained winds of 150 miles per hour and was expected to hit the Bahamas on Sunday. The Prime Minister said about 73,000 residents and 21,000 homes could be affected by the monster storm.
I want you to remember, homes, houses, structures can be replaced. Lives cannot be replaced. We need you as our country continues to grow. To put it in perspective, I am 6'1". The surge are expected to be 2 to 3 times my height. What this would mean is that homes may potentially be completely submerged with water.
But as people in the Bahamas brace for impact, Hurricane Dorian has slightly shifted its course and could potentially miss a direct hit with Florida in the U.S. The Category 4 storm has set course for the Carolinas, but could change its direction again. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is still warning residents to remain vigilant, cautioning that Dorian could still change course again, and that even if it does not make landfall in the state, it could bring dangerous storm surges and flooding. People are filling up on gas, stockpiling food, water, and barricading their homes as a result. Miami has since activated a state of emergency.
How am I prepared? Well, all our windows are boarded up. We have water for the dogs, food for the kids. It's pretty chaotic out there. I'm glad I prepared last weekend.
I guess we're as ready as we'll be. We got our generator and our gas, and that's all we need.
Trinidad and Tobago celebrates its 57th independence. Thousands braved the sweltering heat decked in red, white and black as they gathered in the capital port of Spain. The annual parade saw displays from the national security forces, including the police, fire and prison service, as well as the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, Air Guard and Coast Guards. The state's forces were inspected by President Paul Weeks. The Twin Island Republic gained independence from Britain on August 31st, 1962. Now, in her address to the nation, President Paul Weeks lamented that the country's watchwords of discipline, production and tolerance are significantly depleted. She stressed that Trinidad's disconcerting levels of serious crime have their genesis in citizens' laissez-faire attitude to minor infractions. The president also expressed concern that political discussion, mainly on social media, showcased ethnic intolerance, adding that the country is in danger of losing its vaunted status as a model of ethnic harmony. However, she praised the overall diversity, relative harmony and the richness of cultural traditions, which she says stands out as big hope in a bitterly divided world.
His Excellency's
We move to Colombia, where the decision by dissident FARC leaders to return to the armed struggle has caused a political storm in the nation. The FARC political party has repudiated the group and reaffirmed its commitment to peace. Earlier, we were joined by Susanna Hill, an activist with the People's Assembly in Colombia, who told us she was not surprised by the decision of the rebel leaders.
To be honest, I foresaw that because of all this, that those things that has been happening ever since the peace agreement in 2016. The social leader assassinations, ex-guerrilla members assassinations, threats, all the breaches of the peace agreement. Those things told us that this was going to happen. So it wasn't very surprising, to be honest. All of us know that he responds to very specific interests, and in his speech, even before starting his government, he said that he was going to tear apart the peace agreement. So I don't think that the answer for this situation is in the president. It is in the social movements, in the social mobilizations in the streets to make people understand that the peace has to be implemented by us, by the people, Colombian people.
In other news, Argentina's National Council for Employment, Productivity and Minimum Wage met with representatives of the government, the private sector and unions on Friday to discuss a raise of the minimum wage. While this meeting was taking place, protests were underway in Buenos Aires against the economic woes caused by the President Mauricio Macri's neoliberal policies.
Social movement in Buenos Aires marched to the outside of the Labor Ministry, where the National Council for Employment, Productivity and Minimum Wage was meeting to demand wage salaries that would allow them to live through the month and guarantee food for their children.
Hunger does not wait. Our families cannot wait. What can we tell our kids about the situation that our country is going through?
We need policies that answer the issues facing people's everyday economy. We demand an increase of 70% and a higher coverage of soup kitchens. We are living through misery and hunger, so this government must declare a food emergency.
Social movements and unions marched under the slogan, "End miserable wages, wage increase now." They also demanded that the government declare a food emergency for the most vulnerable sectors who often don't have access to food.
We are living through a food emergency already. They must increase wages and pensions immediately. This is why we are on the streets, to give a voice to those who have the least.
As inflation continues to skyrocket past any expectation, the government recently approved a 25% wage increase, while inflation stood at 55%. In the first of this, workers say they will not sign a wage increase agreement that's below average monthly expenses.
We are living through a time when poverty, hunger, and misery are getting increasingly worse. In 3.5 years, many Argentinians dropped below the poverty line. We must put an end to hunger. That's why we're on the streets.
Social movement asks that President Mauricio Macri listens to the protesters and recognizes that poverty is growing out of control. Meanwhile, unions say that if they do not receive a satisfactory answer, they will continue taking to the streets and start a 36-hour general strike.
Charges have been laid against Sudan's former president. We'll tell you why when we come back. Welcome back. In Africa, the disgraced former president of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, has been charged with illegal use of foreign funds and corruption. A bail request by his lawyers was also denied. Bashir told the courts that he received $25 million from Saudi Arabia's crown prince and used it for donations. He said Prince Mohammed bin Salman sent the money in cash on a private jet as he did not want his name to appear on the transaction. The 75-year-old former president was ousted in April in the wake of mass protests against his 30-year rule.
The evidence provided by the seizure of the foreign currency in the possession of the accused and the codification of the judicial recognition of possession and disposition justifies the continuation of the proceedings until proven their origin and their usage in accordance to the law. For these reasons, we have decided to deny the request of bail and will keep the accused in custody for the purpose of the trial.
The death toll from the Democratic Republic of Congo's year-long Ebola outbreak has crossed 2,000. The government team overseeing the response says the number of confirmed and probable cases has also hit a milestone of more than 3,000. Despite the development of an effective vaccine and treatments, health workers are struggling to overcome community mistrust and widespread security problems. This is the Congo's 10th outbreak and has been ongoing since August last year. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has arrived in Goma in the DR Congo for a first-hand assessment of the fight against Ebola. Guterres started his 3-day tour in the North Kivu province, which is trying to overcome the epidemic. This is the second worst Ebola outbreak in history, after more than 11,000 people were killed in Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia between 2014 and 2016.
There are also major health concerns today. There is measles, there is malaria, there is cholera, and now the terrible tragedy of Ebola. We are entirely alongside the Congolese authorities and the Congolese people to try to better respond to all these challenges.
Thousands of fans have gathered to pay their final respect to Ivory Coast singing sensation DJ Arafat. The 33-year-old, whose real name was Anguille Didier Hougon, died on August 12th in a motorcycle accident. He was popularly known as the King of Coupe de Calais, dance music that is hugely popular in West Africa. A-list African stars such as Davido, Sidiki Diabete, Fally Ipupa and Sergi Bernard sang for the artist at his ceremony.
Deep moments that we had never lived before in the Coup de Calais. We knew Doug Saga, yes, but the issue was something else. And to see him go like this today, words failed me. I wanted to pay a last homage to him and be present at his funeral to accompany him in his final home.
Honestly, if I had not come, I would not be able to mourn. It was very, very important to buy this ticket and come for this funeral. It helped me and gave me pleasure to see this, and at the same time, I will now be able to bear this and I will be able to mourn.
Tunisia's Electoral Commission has announced a final list of 26 presidential candidates to stand in a September 15th poll to elect a successor to late leader Beji Caid Essebsi. Candidates given the green light include the Prime Minister, interim parliamentary speaker, and former defense minister. They also include media mogul Nabil Karoui, despite his arrest on August 23rd for alleged money laundering.
As long as there is no legal decision that prevents someone from running for president, they have the right to do so. And we have 26 candidates who enjoy all the rights to run for president. You can notice their names have been added to the primary list. Today we announced they are definitely candidates for the presidential election.
The president of Guinea-Bissau has announced his bid for a second term in the November presidential elections. Jose Mario Vaz will run as an independent candidate since he was dropped by his party. He told thousands of supporters that this time around he will fulfill the people's needs. The president has been in power since 2014. His 5-year term ended on June 23rd when he appointed a council of ministers to run the country until the elections. Citizens have since pledged their support, praising him for reducing violence in the West African country.
I confirm today before you, my brothers and people of Guinea-Bissau, that this is for you, to realize your wishes. I'm going to continue with you to make this country great, and that's why I'm candidate for the presidential election in 24 November 2019.
I decided to support him again because throughout his term everything worked well. We haven't heard about so many murders as we did before. That's why we support him again, so that he can come back as president.
Over to Europe, Germany's Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations, Jürgen Schulz, has taken a swipe at countries that are reportedly violating the arms embargo in Libya. Speaking at the UN on Friday, he said the influx of weapons into the country is fueling the war between the Tripoli-based Government of National Accord, GNA, and forces loyal to General Khalifa Haftar. The GNA has accused Egypt and the United Arab Emirates of arming Haftar's forces. Fighting between the two sides has killed almost 1,000 people since April.
The purpose of the meeting, the first meeting of this kind since 2014, was to strengthen the dialogue between the committee, the delegation of Libya, and the neighboring countries and countries of the region on the implementation of UN sanctions in relation to Libya. As you know, these sanctions cover areas like the arms embargo, a travel ban, an assets freeze, and means in connection with attempts to illicitly export petroleum. The discussion focused on identifying information gaps and report capacity building requirements in the context of the implementation of the sanctions measures. Particular attention was devoted to the issue of the arms embargo. All participants expressed a grave concern about violations of the arms embargo, and let me stress in my national capacity that we are very concerned about violations of the arms embargo too. We urge all member states of the United Nations to fully and efficiently implement the arms embargo and immediately halt any arms deliveries. The only way for sanctions to have effect is through their full implementation and the determination of the international community.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll shed light on protests in Pakistan against India's decision to strip Kashmir of its autonomy. Don't touch that remote. Bombs and set fires across the city, defying a warning by the police to stay off the streets. Protesters also set piles of rubbish and debris on fire, hoping to block advancing police. Firefighters were at the scene to put out fires, as police fired tear gas and used a water cannon to disperse thousands of protesters. Protests have been taking place in Hong Kong since the end of March, growing increasingly violent and receiving widespread condemnation. Shifting gears now, protesters flooded the streets of Pakistan on Friday after the country's leader called for mass demonstrations against India's decision to revoke Kashmir's autonomy. Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan had called for nationwide protests in solidarity with the people of the Indian-administered Kashmir region. Thousands of people in cities across the country heeded the call. Khan aims to draw global attention to the plight of the divided Himalayan region, and his country has already cut diplomatic and trade ties with India over the region.
The reasons for today's event is to tell our Kashmiri brethren that we are all standing with them. We are with them in their testing times. The message that goes out of here today is that as long as Kashmiris don't get freedom, we will stand with them. We will struggle with them till our last breath.
Demonstrations have been taking place across the United Kingdom against Prime Minister Boris Johnson's decision to suspend Parliament in the run-up to the Brexit deadline. Thousands of protesters took to the streets in cities including Manchester, Leeds, York and Belfast. Parts of central London were brought to a standstill as people chanted, "Stop the coup." On Wednesday, the British Prime Minister decided to prorogue the Parliament until mid-October, restricting MPs from blocking a no-deal Brexit.
I'm here today to defend democracy and fight against everything Boris Johnson stands for. We are fighting for climate justice, we're fighting for a Green New Deal, and part of that is the enfranchisement of young people. And we can't have young people being enfranchised, being able to vote, having their views incorporated into youth policy if Boris Johnson doesn't open back up Parliament. He's currently trying to push through a no-deal Brexit, which all it's going to do is cause food shortages. It's going to cause trauma for so many millions of people, medicine shortages, deportations. The entire thing is a shambles. So I'm here today to fight against it and represent the UK Student Climate Network.
Thousands also gathered in Glasgow to demonstrate against the decision by the UK Prime Minister. Demonstrators were holding placards with messages attacking Johnson and were heard chanting, "Our Parliament has been hijacked." In a second demonstration in Geneva this year, several hundred Yellow Vest protesters gathered outside the United Nations headquarters. They denounced police violence and defended their right to demonstrate in France. Demonstrators were also condemning the police's use of military weapons, particularly the riot control weapon LBD-40, which is manufactured in Switzerland. Yellow Vest protests have been ongoing in France for 42 weeks now, as citizens condemn the economic policies of President Emmanuel Macron.
Originally, I had a rubber bullet, which was a gift from Mrs. Bachelet, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. So I wanted to show her and give her this small necklace if she met Mr. Macron, so that she could show him what they are shooting at the French people and the rescuers.
I am here before the United Nations so that they can revoke a little bit on the repression imposed by the French president on the Yellow Vests, because police violence has really been felt and hardly ever talked about in France. So it is the United Nations that must take over.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.